Amid the icy darkness, a little girl lies near a dumpster, barely conscious. Her voice trembles. "Please, I don't want to die outside." Her plea moves a lonely man to tears and reveals a truth that changes everything. The wind came down hard over Lakewood that night, slamming against the wide glass windows of Ethan Marshall's mansion like it had something to prove. Snow swirled sideways across the yard, swallowing the driveway, softening the edges of the world until everything looked unreal, beautiful, and unforgiving at the same time. Inside, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. A low jazz record crackled from the built-in speakers, trumpet notes drifting through rooms that were too large for one man. The fireplace glowed but didn't warm much beyond its circle. On the walnut coffee table sat 2 glasses of bourbon. One was empty, the other had never been touched. Ethan stood near the window, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled with the precision of a man who controlled everything he could. He watched the storm the way he watched quarterly reports, detached, analytical, removed from consequence. Max wasn't. The golden retriever stood rigid by the front door, a low whine rumbling in his throat. His tail wasn't wagging. His ears were pinned back. "Relax," Ethan muttered without turning around. "It's just weather." Max barked once, sharp, insistent. Ethan exhaled, annoyed at the disruption. Nothing interrupted his nights. Not calls, not people, not surprises. That had been deliberate. He crossed the foyer, unlocked the door, and a blade of icy wind cut straight through the warmth of the house. 2 minutes, he warned the dog. Max bolted into the storm. Ethan stepped out after him, snow crunching under expensive leather shoes not built for weather like this. The cold hit fast, biting through wool, through bone. He scanned the yard, the trees lining the property, the dim outline of trash bins near the back fence. Max wasn't running. He was standing still. Ethan followed the dog's gaze. At first, it looked like a pile of discarded fabric caught against the bins, something pale against the dark plastic. Then it moved, small, curled inward. For a split second, Ethan's mind tried to correct the image. It didn't belong there. Not in a gated neighborhood. Not in a storm like this. He moved closer. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 7, folded in on herself beside the trash cans, as if trying to make her body smaller than the wind. She wore a thin, faded pink dress, the kind meant for spring birthdays, not blizzards. Her bare arms were marked with dark bruises that stood out even in the dim security lights. And her skin had the faint bluish cast of someone losing heat too quickly. Snow had gathered in her hair. "Hey," Ethan said, but his voice didn't come out steady. The girl's eyes opened slowly. They were unfocused at first, like she wasn't sure whether he was real. Her lips were cracked. When she tried to speak, her teeth chattered so hard the words almost disappeared between them. "Mister," she whispered. He crouched instantly, the snow soaking through his slacks. He didn't care. "Mister, I don't want to die outside." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't loud. They were simple, stated like a fact she had already accepted. Something inside Ethan tore open. Not on my watch. He hadn't meant to say it out loud, but he did. "Not on my watch," he repeated, firmer now, as if the storm itself needed to hear him. He slid his coat off and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her body was frighteningly light when he lifted her. Too light. She flinched the second his arms tightened. Hey, he murmured. You're safe." Her fingers grabbed at his collar like she was afraid he'd vanish. "Don't take me back," she gasped. panic suddenly cutting through the cold. "She'll find me." "The bad lady. She'll find me." Ethan felt her trembling intensify, not from temperature, but from memory. "I'm not taking you anywhere you don't want to go," he said quietly. "You hear me?" Her eyes searched his face as if measuring whether he was telling the truth. Children who trusted easily didn't look like that. Max stayed close, pressing his body against her legs as Ethan carried her toward the house. Snow whipped against them, erasing footprints almost instantly, as if trying to hide that she'd ever been there at all. Inside, warmth rushed to meet them. The door shut hard behind his back, sealing out the storm. But the silence inside felt different now. He laid her carefully on the couch near the fire, grabbing blankets, towels, anything within reach. His movements were efficient, controlled, but his hands weren't steady. She clung to the edge of his coat like letting go would send her back into the snow. "You're okay," he said again, though the words sounded like they were meant for himself. Up close, the bruises were clearer, faint finger-shaped marks along her upper arm, a healing cut near her collarbone. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a child who got lost playing in the yard. This was a child who had run. Her eyes darted toward the front door at every small sound. "She can't come here," the girl whispered urgently. "She doesn't like when I hide." "No one is coming in here," Ethan said, more sharply than he intended. He softened his tone. "No one gets through that door without me knowing." He realized something then. The house he had built like a fortress-gated, secured, controlled, had never actually protected anyone before. He reached for his phone, already knowing who he needed to call. But before he dialed, he looked down at the small, shaking girl wrapped in his coat, sitting in the center of a living room that had never once felt like a living space. He had spent years making sure nothing unexpected entered his life. And now, the most fragile thing he'd ever held was sitting on his couch, asking not to die. He swallowed hard. Outside, the blizzard roared on, indifferent. Inside, Ethan Marshall understood something with terrifying clarity. If he handed her back to the wrong hands, this moment would follow him for the rest of his life. And this time, he would not be able to say he hadn't seen it. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself to eye level. "You're not dying tonight," he said quietly. "Not outside, not anywhere." For the first time since he'd found her, the girl let her eyes close, but her fingers never loosened their grip. The storm didn't let up. It pressed against the windows like a living thing, snow spiraling under the porch lights, wind scraping along the glass in long, restless sighs. Inside, the fireplace worked harder than it ever had, flames steady but strained, as if even the house wasn't used to holding something this fragile. Noah sat curled at the far end of the couch, still wrapped in Ethan's coat and 2 thick wool blankets. Max had planted himself at her feet, chin resting on her ankle, as if he'd appointed himself guardian without asking permission. Ethan kept his distance at first. Not emotionally, physically. He stood near the kitchen island, phone in hand, watching her the way someone watches a candle in a dark room, afraid that if they move too fast, the flame will flicker out. Her eyes were open now. Not wide, just alert, measuring. Can I get you something?" he asked carefully. "Soup? Water?" She shook her head quickly. "I'm fine," she said, the words automatic, rehearsed. "I'm just waiting for my mom." The sentence was too smooth, too prepared. Ethan nodded as if he believed her. "Okay." He didn't. Her gaze drifted to the windows every few seconds. Every creak of the house made her shoulders tense. When the wind slammed a loose branch against the siding, she flinched so violently that Max lifted his head in concern. "You're safe," Ethan repeated. She swallowed. "I'm not trouble," she added quickly, almost urgently. "I don't eat much. I can stay quiet." There it was. Not fear of the cold, fear of being inconvenient. Ethan moved closer, crouching a few feet away so he wouldn't tower over her. "No one said you were trouble." She looked at him then, really looked at him, like she was waiting for the part where adults change their tone. His phone buzzed in his hand. He stepped into the hallway and made the call. Rachel answered on the second ring. "Ethan, it's midnight." "I need you," he said, voice low. "It's a child. 7, maybe. Hypothermic. Bruises." There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation. Assessment. "Address?" "Already sending it." "I'll be there," she said, and hung up. Back in the living room, Noah hadn't moved. She still wore the thin pink dress beneath the blankets. Snowmelt had dried in uneven patches along the hem. Ethan noticed her fingers clutching the fabric tightly, as if taking it off would mean surrendering something. "You can change into something warmer," he offered gently. "I've got—" "No," she said too fast. Her hand flew to her chest. "I'm okay." He saw it then, a flicker of panic at the idea of removing even one layer. Protection, even if it wasn't much. He didn't push. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later, boots crunching hard against the ice outside. She stepped in carrying a medical bag, snow-dusting her dark hair, and her eyes immediately scanning the room. The sight of Noah made her expression shift professional, but softer. "Hi there," Rachel said, kneeling a safe distance away. "I'm Rachel. I'm just going to check if your body's still mad at this weather, okay?" Noah didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. Rachel worked gently checking pulse, temperature, responsiveness. Her movements were steady, practiced, but her jaw tightened when she rolled Noah's sleeve back just slightly. Bruises, old and new, not clustered in one place, not random, different stages of healing. Rachel met Ethan's eyes briefly. A silent exchange, not accidental. Noah flinched when Rachel's stethoscope touched her skin. "Sorry," Rachel murmured. "Cold." "I'm fine," Noah insisted again. Rachel's gaze dropped to Noah's small hand as she adjusted the blanket. Something faint caught her attention. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "can I see your hand?" Noah hesitated. Rachel didn't force it. She just waited. Slowly, Noah opened her fingers. Across the side of her palm, in shaky blue ink, was a phone number. The last 2 digits had smeared. The lines were thin, like the pen had been pressed too hard in a rush. Rachel traced the air just above it without touching. "Who wrote this for you?" Noah's lips trembled before she could stop them. "My mom," she whispered. "She said, if I got lost, I should show someone, before they took me." The room went very still. Ethan felt something sharp press behind his ribs. "Before who took you?" he asked quietly. Noah's eyes flicked toward the door. "She said I had to be brave," she murmured, "and not cry." Rachel finished her check, then stood slowly. "She needs fluids, warmth, and rest tonight. Hospital isn't necessary unless her temp drops again. But Ethan—" He followed her into the kitchen. "This isn't just neglect," Rachel said under her breath. "This is fear conditioning. Look at how she apologizes for existing." Ethan rubbed his hand over his mouth. "I can keep her here tonight." Rachel studied him. "Can you?" she asked carefully. Or are you planning to hand her off the second it gets complicated? The question hit harder than she probably intended. He glanced back into the living room. Noah was still sitting upright, not fully relaxing, even under 3 layers of warmth. "We'll get her through the night," he said finally. "In the morning, we'll figure it out." Rachel didn't challenge him, but she didn't look convinced either. When Ethan returned, Noah's eyes were heavy. Exhaustion had finally begun to win. "I'm sorry," she mumbled suddenly. "For what?" "For being here." He knelt again, lowering himself so they were eye level. "Listen to me," he said, voice steady but softer than he'd heard it in years. "Safety isn't a toy on a shelf you earn by being good. It's air. And in this house, you get to breathe." She blinked at him like she'd never heard that before. Outside, the storm howled louder, wind rattling the panes like a warning. Inside, Noah finally leaned sideways. Max shifted immediately, letting her small hands sink into the thick fur at his neck. She held on as if he were an anchor, keeping her from drifting back into the dark. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. Ethan stood there longer than necessary, watching. The house felt different now. Not warmer, not yet, but less empty. Rachel gathered her things quietly. "Call me if she spikes a fever." "I will." She paused at the door. "Ethan, children who run into storms don't do it for attention. They do it because whatever they're leaving feels worse." He nodded. After she left, the house fell silent again, except for the storm. Ethan turned off the music. The untouched glass of bourbon still sat on the table. He looked at it for a long moment before pouring it down the sink. He walked back into the living room and dimmed the lights. Noah stirred in her sleep, fingers tightening in Max's fur. Even unconscious, she didn't let go. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the small figure on his couch. He had built this house to keep chaos out. Tonight, chaos had walked in wearing a pink dress and a number written in ink. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure whether the storm outside was the real danger or the one that would arrive with morning. Morning arrived quietly. The blizzard had spent itself during the night, leaving Lakewood buried under a deceptive blanket of white. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, clean and almost innocent, as if nothing violent had happened in the dark. Ethan stood in the kitchen, staring at the backyard. The snow had erased every footprint, including the small, uneven trail where he had found her. If he hadn't carried her inside, there would be no evidence she'd ever been there at all. Behind him, he heard the soft scrape of a chair. Noah sat at the edge of the dining table, wearing one of his spare T-shirts that hung past her knees. Her pink dress lay folded carefully beside her, as if it were something valuable. Max sat pressed against her leg like a shadow. She was eating toast, slowly, carefully. But not like a child who was hungry, but like someone unsure whether the plate might be taken away. "You can have more," Ethan said. She nodded, but didn't reach for it. The ink on her hand had faded slightly overnight. The numbers were still there, though, the last 2 digits blurred beyond recognition. Rachel had called early, already running the number through hospital networks. Ethan had done his own searching. Missing child reports, county placement notices, private foster pipelines. One alert had stopped him cold. Female, age 7, name, Noah Grace, listed as missing from placement 3 days ago. The phrase struck him as wrong. Missing from placement, as if she were a misplaced file. He set his phone down carefully and walked back to the table. "What's your last name, Noah?" She hesitated. "Grace," she said finally, almost too softly to hear. Ethan felt his pulse steady into something colder. Is your mom's name Linda? Her head snapped up. How do you know that? He didn't answer immediately. He crouched instead, lowering himself so they were level. You're not in trouble, he said, but I need to understand what happened. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She said if I ever got lost, Noah whispered, I should show someone the number. But they took my phone, and I couldn't remember the last numbers. I tried. Ethan glanced at the ink again. You ran. She nodded once. They said she wasn't safe, Noah continued, voice thin but steady. They said I'd be better, but she cried when they took me. The word they hung in the air. Who's they? He asked carefully. Noah's jaw set in a way that didn't belong on a 7-year-old. The lady, she said. Hazel. The name matched the file. Hazel Bryant, operator of a private placement facility subcontracted through County Overflow. Ethan had already seen 2 complaints buried deep in online court records. Administrative disputes. Nothing conclusive, but enough to make him uneasy. His phone buzzed. Rachel. They flagged it, she said immediately when he answered. The number belongs to Linda Grace. She's admitted at St. Matthew's Domestic Violence Unit. Severe injuries. 3 weeks ago. Alive. The word hit him harder than he expected. And the placement? He asked. Transferred to a private contractor. Hazel Bryant. Of course. Ethan's jaw tightened. So the mother was hospitalized, he said slowly, and the child was reassigned. Temporarily, Rachel replied. On paper. On paper. He ended the call and looked across the table at Noah. She was watching him the way children watch adults right before bad news. He could lie, he could soften it, or he could treat her like someone who deserved truth. Your mom's alive, he said gently. The chair scraped loudly as Noah stood so fast it nearly tipped over. She is? She's at a hospital. She's been hurt, but she's alive. For a moment, hope flickered across her face so bright it hurt to see. Then fear swallowed it. Does she know where I am? She asked. I don't think she was told the truth. Noah's shoulders sagged. She sat back down slowly. They said she didn't want me, she whispered, that she signed papers. Ethan felt something sharp in his chest. Paper could say anything if someone controlled the pen. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Cheryl Stanton. I saw the alert, she said without greeting. If that child is in your house, you're already inside a legal situation. I know. She's listed under Bryant's guardianship. If you don't notify authorities properly, you risk being accused of interference. Ethan glanced at Noah, who was now stroking Max's ears absently. And if I do notify them? He asked. Then the system steps in, which means she could be returned to the listed guardian unless there's proof of danger. He closed his eyes briefly. Cheryl. If I hand her back and something happens, once you've seen enough to suspect harm, Cheryl interrupted quietly, walking away becomes its own decision. The words settled heavily. He hung up and leaned against the counter. Sunlight flooded the room, illuminating dust motes in the air, glinting off marble and steel. The house looked flawless, but at the table sat a child who had run into a blizzard rather than stay where she was assigned. Ethan watched her pick up a second piece of toast, this time a little less cautiously. If he handed her back now, he would be able to say he followed procedure. He would also know exactly what he was leaving behind. Noah looked up suddenly. Are they coming? She asked. He met her eyes. Yes, he said honestly. But so am I. She studied him, uncertain. "You won't let her take me?" He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. "I won't let anyone take you without knowing the whole truth," he said. Outside, the snow glittered peacefully under the morning sun. Inside, Ethan understood something with unsettling clarity. The storm hadn't ended. It had just changed shape. By late morning, the snow had settled into stillness. Lakewood looked almost peaceful, driveways carved open, neighbors shoveling in quiet rhythm, sunlight flashing off white rooftops. The violence of the night had been smoothed into something postcard-worthy. Inside Ethan's house, the calm felt thinner. Noah had migrated from the dining table to the hallway without anyone noticing. Ethan only realized she was gone when Max lifted his head and trotted toward the laundry room. The doorbell rang. The sound sliced clean through the house. Noah froze. Ethan opened the door to find a woman in a dark wool coat, ID badge visible, expression steady but not unkind. "Mr. Marshall? Dana Reyes, Child Protective Services." He stepped aside. Dana entered carefully, scanning the room the way professionals do, not suspicious, just thorough. She took in the high ceilings, the expensive art, the visible security system. Her eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary on the fireplace, the couch, the folded pink dress on the armrest. "You reported finding a minor outside your residence last night?" she asked. "Yes." "And you've confirmed her identity as Noah Grace?" "Yes." Donna nodded once, making a note. "She's listed as missing from placement under a temporary guardianship agreement. The assigned guardian is Hazel Bryant." At the sound of that name, Max gave a low growl from the hallway. Ethan felt it too, the tightening in his chest. "She ran," he said evenly. "In a blizzard." Dana didn't argue. She didn't agree either. "My responsibility," she said carefully, "is to verify her safety and determine whether returning her to the guardian of record is appropriate." The word returning felt wrong in Ethan's ears. "She's in the laundry room," he said quietly. Dana approached slowly. The laundry room was dimmer than the rest of the house. Sunlight filtered through a small frosted window, illuminating rows of hanging coats and jackets. Noah stood behind them, half hidden in the fabric like it was camouflage. She was whispering into Max's fur. "If they make me go back, I won't make it." The words were small, barely sound, but Ethan heard them. He stepped forward first. "Noah!" She flinched hard. Dana stopped in the doorway, giving space. Noah's eyes were wide, breathing shallow. She wasn't crying, she was bracing. Ethan knelt slowly, careful not to rush. "She's just here to make sure you're safe," he said. Noah shook her head. "They always say that." The sentence carried more history than it should have. Dana crouched as well, keeping her voice measured. "Noah, I need to ask you a few questions." Noah didn't look at her. She looked at Ethan, and he felt the weight of that trust settle into him like something fragile and breakable. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. She nodded once. Dana proceeded gently. Where had she been? Who had she been living with? Had she been hurt? Noah answered in fragments. Never directly accusing, never dramatic, just enough for silence to fill in the rest. Dana stood slowly when she finished. "The guardian of record has been notified," she said to Ethan. "Ms. Bryant will likely request a verification visit today." "Today?" he asked. "Yes. That's protocol." Protocol? The word felt sterile in his mouth. Noah slipped past them both and retreated to the living room. Max followed immediately. Ethan remained in the hallway. "There are bruises," he said quietly. "I saw," Dana replied. And fear responses that don't come from nowhere. Dana didn't disagree. But unless we can substantiate immediate danger or fraudulent guardianship, she said carefully. I can't deny a legal guardian access. Ethan leaned against the wall. For a second, the room shifted, not physically, but emotionally. The sunlight, the white walls, the order of everything around him felt like a facade. I wasn't there, he said suddenly, more to himself than to her. Dana paused. For who? She asked. He didn't look at her. Someone I should have protected, he said. I was in a meeting. I told myself it was important. By the time I answered my phone, it was too late. The house had been built after that. High security, controlled entry, predictable systems, control instead of presence. I keep thinking if I manage everything tightly enough, he continued, voice roughening, nothing bad can happen again. Dana watched him quietly. But that's not protection, he said. That's fear. Silence stretched between them. In the living room, Noah sat stiffly on the couch, eyes fixed on the front door like she could see through it. Dana closed her folder. I'm not here to be your enemy, Mr. Marshall, she said, but I have to follow procedure. And if procedure puts her back somewhere she ran from? Then we document, we investigate, we escalate, if necessary. The doorbell rang again. Noah flinched visibly this time. Dana glanced at Ethan. That will be her, she said. Hazel Bryant was the official guardian of record, and she was about to walk through his door in broad daylight. The storm outside had ended, but the real confrontation had just arrived. The storm has passed, but Ethan's true test has just begun. We've all carried the heavy weight of past regrets. But would you break the rules to give this child a second chance? Tell me your thoughts below. Ethan opened the door. Hazel Bryant stood framed in winter sunlight, polished and composed as if she were arriving for brunch rather than retrieving a child who had run into a blizzard. Her wool coat was tailored, her boots spotless despite the snow. A leather folder rested neatly in her gloved hands. Her smile appeared instantly. Mr. Marshall, she said warmly, thank you for keeping Noah safe. She can be impulsive. Behind him, Noah made a small sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Hazel's eyes flicked past Ethan's shoulder, locking onto the child like a hunter confirming sightline. There you are, sweetheart, Hazel cooed. You gave us quite a scare. Noah backed into the arm of the couch until she couldn't go farther. Max stood in front of her now, body stiff. Dana stepped forward. Ms. Bryant, I'll need to review documentation before any transfer. Hazel handed over the folder without hesitation. Of course, she said smoothly. Temporary guardianship, court acknowledgement, placement authorization, everything is in order. Her tone carried a subtle edge confidence bordering on challenge. Ethan remained between Hazel and the living room. You can stay right there, he said evenly. Hazel's smile thinned slightly. I understand emotions are high, she replied, but Noah belongs in structured care. She has a history of dramatizing situations. That's her, Noah whispered, barely audible. That's the bad lady. Hazel's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened for a fraction of a second. Dana reviewed the paperwork carefully. Silence filled the room except for the faint crackle of the fireplace. Ethan watched Noah's body language more than he watched Hazel. The way her shoulders curled inward, the way her hands twisted in Max's fur. This wasn't the tension of a child caught misbehaving, this was terror. Ms. Bryant, Dana said slowly, these documents are missing the county seal on page 3. Hazel blinked once. That must be an administrative oversight. And the case number format is outdated, Dana continued. Hazel's composure tightened. Ethan stepped back just enough to keep Noah behind him. "I've asked my counsel to review everything," he said calmly. "Until that happens, she's not leaving." Hazel turned her attention fully to him now. "With respect," she said, "you found her on your property. That doesn't make you her guardian." "No," Ethan replied, "but it does make me responsible for what I saw." Rachel entered from the hallway, having returned after Dana's earlier update. She positioned herself subtly near Noah. "I've treated children from your facility before," Rachel said quietly. "Accident-prone, always apologizing, always misunderstood." Hazel's jaw tightened. "Ah, that's an accusation." "It's a pattern," Rachel corrected. Cheryl's voice suddenly joined the room through Ethan's phone on speaker. "I'm reviewing scanned copies now," Cheryl said. "Mr. Marshall, the guardianship order references a hearing that doesn't exist in the public docket. That's a problem." Hazel inhaled sharply. Dana straightened. "Ms. Bryant, I'm placing a temporary welfare hold pending verification." "You can't do that without cause," Hazel snapped. "The cause," Dana replied evenly, "is a 7-year-old who ran into a snowstorm." Silence. Hazel's carefully constructed warmth cracked. "You think you're saving her," she said softly, eyes flicking toward Noah. "You have no idea what she's like." Noah's breathing quickened. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "You're done speaking about her like she's a file." Hazel's gaze sharpened. For a moment, the mask fell completely. As officers arrived at Dana's request, Hazel gathered her coat with sharp movements. "Oh, this isn't over," she murmured under her breath as she passed close enough for Noah to hear. "You can't hide in a rich man's house forever." Noah shrank back. Ethan stepped forward instantly, placing himself between them. "You will not speak to her again without supervision," he said quietly. Hazel was escorted out, heels striking the marble floor in angry rhythm. The door closed behind her with a final heavy click. The house exhaled. Noah's legs gave out. She slid down the side of the couch, shaking. Rachel was beside her immediately. Ethan followed more slowly, kneeling in front of her. "She's gone," he said. "She's not coming back in here." Noah looked at him as if testing the truth of that statement. "They always come back," she whispered. "Not this time." Dana approached, her tone gentler now. "We'll investigate the paperwork thoroughly. There are irregularities." "Is she going back?" Noah asked directly. Dana paused. "Not today," she said. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Later, when the house had quieted again, Ethan found Noah sitting cross-legged on the rug near the fireplace. Max rested his head in her lap. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Do what?" "Stand there." Ethan considered the question. "Yes," he said finally. "I did." She studied him. "Why?" He sat across from her, the firelight casting shifting shadows on the walls. "Because once you see something clearly," he said, "you don't get to pretend you didn't." Noah's fingers tightened in Max's fur. "I thought maybe," she whispered, "if I was good enough, she'd stop." Rachel, standing nearby, spoke gently. "Abuse doesn't always start with bruises," she said. "Sometimes it starts with making someone believe they have to shrink to survive." Ethan looked at Noah, really looked at her. "You don't have to shrink here," he said. For the first time since he'd found her, Noah's shoulders lowered a fraction. Outside, the snow glowed under afternoon sun. Calm, beautiful, misleading. Inside, the real battle had begun, and Ethan knew something with absolute certainty now. Helping her would cost him. The only question left was whether he was willing to pay it. By late afternoon, the house no longer felt like a temporary shelter. It felt like a line had been drawn. Hazel Bryant's arrest had moved quickly once Dana's team uncovered discrepancies in the guardianship documents. Improper filings, misused stipends, a pattern of temporary placements that extended longer than legally justified, enough to open an investigation, enough to stall any immediate return, but not enough to guarantee Noah's future. Ethan stood in his home office, the same room where he had closed seven-figure deals without flinching. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the snow-covered yard. His desk was immaculate. His calendar was not. His assistant's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "The board is waiting, Ethan. The acquisition vote can't be postponed again." He looked down at the legal documents Cheryl had emailed him, emergency guardianship petition forms. "I'm not coming," he said. A pause, then disbelief. "This deal affects 300 employees. I'm aware. And your absence will be interpreted." He thought about a 7-year-old girl flinching at a doorbell. "Let it be interpreted," he said quietly, and ended the call. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Cheryl arrived in person an hour later, legal folder tucked under her arm. "If you file for emergency guardianship," she said without preamble, "you're inviting scrutiny, background checks, home evaluations, media curiosity if Bryant's case escalates." "Good," Ethan replied. She studied him. "You understand this won't be clean?" she pressed. "You run a company. Investors don't like unpredictability." He glanced toward the living room, where Noah was sitting on the floor with Max, building a small wall out of wooden blocks she'd found in a decorative basket. "I used to think unpredictability was the enemy," he said. "Turns out neglect is." Cheryl's expression softened just slightly. "You're doing this for more than her," she observed. Ethan didn't deny it. "There was someone else," he said after a moment. "Years ago." He rarely spoke about it. The accident, the phone call he didn't answer, the words he'd said too late. "Not on my watch." "I built this house like a fortress after that," he continued. "Security systems, controlled entries, schedules that left no room for surprise. And none of it protected the person who needed me." Cheryl closed the folder slowly. "You can't rewrite that night." "No," he agreed, "but I can refuse to repeat it." The paperwork felt heavier than it should have when he signed it. Across the room, Noah looked up as if sensing something had shifted. Rachel arrived soon after, bringing new information. "They located Linda Grace," she said gently. "She's still admitted at St. Matthew's, severe injuries from domestic assault. She was told her daughter had been placed somewhere safe." Noah went very still. "She thought you were protected," Rachel added softly. Noah's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Does she remember me?" she asked. Ethan crossed the room and knelt in front of her. "A mother doesn't forget," he said carefully. "People get buried under fear, but love remembers." Noah searched his face for doubt. "And if she doesn't want me back?" she whispered. He didn't rush the answer. "Then we figure it out together," he said. "You won't disappear again." Cheryl cleared her throat gently. "Emergency hearing is tomorrow morning. Temporary guardianship until the investigation concludes. Linda's medical team confirms she's in no condition to resume custody yet." So she stays here? Noah asked quietly. If the judge agrees, Ethan replied. She nodded, absorbing that. That evening, the board chair called directly. "This is reckless," the man said bluntly. "You're jeopardizing shareholder confidence over a personal issue." Ethan looked at the child asleep on his couch. Max curled at her feet, the pink dress folded neatly beside her like something sacred. "No," he said evenly. "This is the issue." He ended the call without waiting for a response. Later, after Rachel and Cheryl had left, Ethan walked through the house alone. The security cameras, the reinforced doors, the systems he had trusted to keep loss out. They had never been the solution. He paused at the fireplace. Noah had left one of the wooden blocks there, accidentally forgotten. A single small square in the center of a vast room. He picked it up, turning it in his hand. Helping her would cost him reputation, leverage, maybe profit. But walking away would cost him something he had already lost once before: his ability to look himself in the mirror without flinching. He set the block back down carefully. In the living room, Noah stirred in her sleep. "Are they coming back?" she murmured, not fully awake. Ethan sat beside her. "No," he said softly. Tomorrow we make it official." Outside, the snow began to fall again, lighter this time. Not violent, just steady. Inside, Ethan Marshall understood something with absolute clarity. Redemption isn't loud. It's paperwork signed when no one is applauding. It's meetings canceled without explanation. It's choosing a child over optics. And for the first time in years, the cost didn't frighten him. It felt necessary. The courtroom was smaller than Ethan expected. No grand speeches, no dramatic pauses, just fluorescent lights, a wood-paneled bench, and a judge who had likely heard 100 versions of Heartbreak before noon. Noah sat beside him in a simple navy sweater Rachel had brought over that morning. Her legs didn't quite reach the floor from the wooden chair. Max wasn't allowed inside, but she kept one hand wrapped around a strand of his fur she had tucked into her pocket, like proof that something loyal still existed outside those walls. Linda Grace appeared by video from St. Matthew's Hospital. She looked thinner than the photo Ethan had found in Noah's folded necklace scrap. Pale, healing, but alive. The moment Noah saw her on the screen, she inhaled sharply. "Mom?" Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, baby," she sobbed. "Oh, my sweet girl." The sound in her voice carried weeks of restraint breaking open at once. "They told me you were safe," Linda said through tears. "They told me you were somewhere warm. I couldn't reach you." Noah slid off her chair before anyone could stop her and stood closer to the screen. "I wrote the numbers," Linda continued, lifting her own hand weakly as if remembering. "I wrote them before they took you. I thought if you ever got away—" "You said be brave," Noah whispered. Linda nodded, crying openly now. "I'm so sorry. They cornered me. They said I couldn't protect you like this." Ethan felt something settle inside him. Not anger this time, but clarity. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't posture. He didn't dramatize. "She ran into a blizzard rather than stay where she was assigned," he said calmly. "That alone should tell us something." Dana Reyes submitted her report. Cheryl presented the irregularities in Hazel Bryant's documentation. While the investigation was ongoing, charges pending, the judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Marshall, you understand that temporary guardianship is not ownership. It is responsibility." "Yes, Your Honor. It requires consistency, patience, oversight." "I understand." The judge looked at Noah. "Do you feel safe in his home?" Noah hesitated only a second. "Yes." The word wasn't loud, but it was steady. Temporary guardianship was granted, pending further review and Linda's recovery. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't final. But it was enough. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove Noah to St. Matthew's. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something floral someone had left on the windowsill. Linda sat upright now, bruises fading yellow along her jaw, intravenous line removed. Noah didn't hesitate this time. She ran. Linda caught her, arms wrapping around her daughter as if anchoring her back into the world. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just held on. Ethan stepped back, giving them space. After several minutes, Linda looked up at him, eyes red but steady. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to." He shook his head. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Linda swallowed. "I need time to heal," she admitted, "to testify, to rebuild. But I don't want her anywhere near that system again." "She won't be," Ethan assured her. Linda reached for his hand. "Promise me," she said softly. "Promise she won't disappear again." He held her gaze. "I promise." Weeks passed. Hazel Bryant's case widened. Other complaints surfaced. Other children came forward. The investigation moved methodically, without spectacle. Noah started school again, tentative at first, then more certain. Rachel stopped by often, sometimes as a doctor, sometimes simply as someone who understood what it meant to survive systems that claimed to protect you. Olinda began physical therapy. Court dates were scheduled. Plans were discussed carefully, respectfully. Nothing was magically solved. But no one was alone anymore. On Christmas Eve, snow returned lighter than that first night, falling in soft, forgiving patterns. Ethan's house looked different now, not because of decorations, though there were more of those than ever before, because there was sound. Noah's laughter echoed down the hallway as Max chased wrapping paper across the floor. Rachel stood in the kitchen with Linda, who leaned carefully against the counter, but insisted on helping anyway. On the refrigerator door hung a drawing in bright crayon. 4 stick figures stood under a crooked yellow sun, one taller than the rest. One with long brown hair, one with a hospital bracelet, one with glasses, and a golden dog drawn far too large with what looked suspiciously like a halo above his head. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching. For years his dining table had been set for one. That night, there were 5 plates, one of them still symbolically waiting for the day Linda would be strong enough to reclaim full custody without fear. Noah tugged at his sleeve. "Is it okay if I put my stocking here?" she asked, pointing to the mantel. He nodded. "Wherever you want." She placed it carefully beside his, not below, beside. Later, when the house quieted and the lights dimmed, Ethan stepped outside onto the porch. Snow settled gently across the yard, the same yard where he had found a child curled against the trash bins weeks ago. He could still see it clearly in his mind. The small pink dress, the words whispered through frozen lips. "I don't want to die outside." He had built walls to keep pain out. Instead, they had kept life out. Redemption, he was learning, wasn't dramatic rescue. It was staying. It was courtrooms and paperwork and canceled meetings. It was letting a child's drawing take up space on a refrigerator that once held nothing but schedules. He couldn't save everyone. No one could. But once you truly see a face, once you hear a plea that simple and that honest, you don't get to unsee it. Inside, Noah laughed at something Max had done. The sound carried through the door, warm and steady. Ethan turned back toward the light. For the first time in years, the house no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. And this time, when he whispered, "Not on my watch," it wasn't regret, it was peace. And that's where this story comes to a close. If you were in the main character's shoes, what would you have done? Would you have noticed? Would you have stayed? I'd honestly love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Let's talk about the kind of world we're all trying to build. If this story touched something in you, even in a quiet way, please like, share, and subscribe. Even though all characters and events are fictional, this story was created for entertainment, to inspire hope, compassion, and the kind of quiet strength that restores faith in humanity. Explore more heartwarming stories and restorative life lessons in the playlist right here on screen. I'm Flint. Thanks for spending this time with me. Wishing you gentleness, clarity, and the courage to truly listen. I'll see you in the next story, friend.